The words hit me like ice water. No job again? You'll always be a loser. My own daughter-in-law in front of my grandchildren, at my son's dinner table. I'm 63 years old, and in that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my entire life. My name is Rose, and I never imagined my life would take this turn. 3 years ago, I was living comfortably in the home I shared with my husband of 38 years. We had our routines, our little jokes, our quiet evenings watching the news together. Then cancer took him away, and everything I thought I knew about my place in this world crumbled like old paper. You know that feeling when you wake up one morning and realize you're completely alone? Not just physically alone, but emotionally adrift in a world that suddenly doesn't seem to have space for you anymore. That's exactly how I felt after the funeral flowers wilted and the casseroles stopped coming. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that made my chest ache every time I walked past his empty chair. My son Daniel noticed I was struggling. He's a good man, my Daniel, always has been. Even as a little boy, he'd bring me dandelions from the yard when I looked sad. So when he suggested I move in with him, Patricia, and the kids, it felt like a lifeline. Mom, he said, his voice gentle but firm, you shouldn't be alone right now. We have the space, and Grace and Oliver would love having Grandma around more. Patricia smiled when he said this, but I noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. Still, I was grateful. At 60, starting over felt impossible, and having family around seemed like the answer to the loneliness that was eating me alive from the inside out. The first few months weren't terrible. I helped with the children, did some cooking, tried to make myself useful without being intrusive. Grace, my 8-year-old granddaughter, would crawl into my lap while I read her stories, and Oliver, 10 and full of energy, would tell me about his day at school with the kind of enthusiasm that made me remember why I loved being a grandmother. These moments felt like small gifts, reminders that I still had purpose, but I noticed things, little things that made my stomach twist with unease. Patricia would grow quiet when I entered a room. She'd make comments about the grocery bill going up, about how cramped the house was getting, about needing more family time, which seemed to mean time without me. When I offered to help with dinner, she'd decline with a tight smile. When I suggested activities for the kids, she'd already have plans that somehow didn't include me. You know that feeling when you're trying so hard to be invisible that you almost disappear from your own life? I started eating my meals earlier or later than the family, spending more time in my room, speaking only when spoken to. I thought if I could just be smaller, quieter, less of a burden, maybe things would improve. Then I lost my job. After 15 years of working at Henderson and Associates, doing bookkeeping for small businesses in town, they restructured. That's what they called it when they decided that someone my age wasn't worth keeping around. The younger employees stayed, the ones who understood the new software better, who didn't need reading glasses to see the computer screen, who didn't ask questions about the systems that seemed to change every few months. I'll never forget that day. Mr. Henderson called me into his office, and I could tell from his expression that whatever was coming wouldn't be good. Rose, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, we're making some changes to streamline operations. Your position is being eliminated, but we want you to know how much we've appreciated your years of service. Years of service. Like I was a piece of equipment that had finally worn out. The severance package was modest, and at my age, finding new employment felt like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. I applied everywhere, retail stores, offices, even restaurants. Most places didn't even call back. The ones that did made it clear that they were looking for someone more energetic, or more tech-savvy, or more flexible with scheduling. Code words that all meant the same thing. Too old. Patricia's attitude shifted after I lost my job. The polite pretense dropped away like a mask she was tired of wearing. She'd make pointed comments about pulling your own weight and temporary arrangements becoming permanent. She'd talk about their financial goals, their plans for the future, always with the implication that I was an obstacle to their dreams. Daniel, bless his heart, tried to mediate. He'd remind Patricia that I was going through a tough time and that family helps family. But I could see the stress in his face, the way he'd rub his temples when he thought no one was looking. I was causing problems in his marriage, and that knowledge sat in my stomach like a stone. The job interviews became a special kind of torture. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and can see the exact moment someone decides you're not what they're looking for? It happened over and over. I'd dress carefully, practice my answers, arrive early with copies of my resume, and then watch as their expressions changed when they realized how old I was. Some were polite about it, others weren't. After each rejection, I'd come home feeling smaller, more defeated. Patricia would ask how it went with the kind of false concern that made my skin crawl. "Any luck today?" she'd say, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice when I shook my head. It was becoming clear that she didn't want me to find a job. She wanted me to fail so completely that I'd have no choice but to leave. But where would I go? The house I'd shared with my husband was sold to pay for his medical bills. My savings were dwindling. My friends were scattered, dealing with their own aging parents and empty nests. I felt trapped in a situation where I was neither wanted nor able to leave. The children began to sense the tension. Grace would look between Patricia and me with worried eyes, and Oliver started spending more time in his room. I hated that my presence was affecting them, adding stress to their young lives. These kids deserved better than to grow up in a house where their grandmother was treated like an unwelcome guest. You know that feeling when you're drowning, but everyone around you thinks you're just swimming? That's where I was in the weeks leading up to that terrible dinner, going through the motions of looking for work, trying to be helpful around the house, pretending that the constant undercurrent of resentment wasn't slowly killing my spirit. I had one interview that seemed promising, a part-time position at a local nonprofit helping seniors with their taxes. The director, a woman about my age, seemed genuinely interested in my experience. "We value mature employees," she said. "They tend to be more reliable, more patient with our clients." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. But then she called back. "Budget cuts," she explained. They decided to combine the position with another role, and they needed someone who could work full time. Another door closed, another reminder that in a world obsessed with youth and innovation, there wasn't much room for someone like me. That Tuesday evening, I was particularly vulnerable. The rejection from the nonprofit had come that morning, and I'd spent the day wondering if I should just give up entirely. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe I was a burden, a relic from another era, trying to hang on in a world that had moved past me. Dinner started normally enough. Daniel talked about his day at the construction company, where he worked as a foreman. The kids chattered about school projects and playground dramas. I helped Patricia serve the meal, hoping that being useful might earn me a moment of peace, but I could feel the tension building in her, the way her movements became sharper, more deliberate. You know that feeling when a storm is coming and the air gets heavy and electric? That's exactly what the atmosphere felt like as we sat down to eat. I should have seen what was coming, should have recognized the signs. But I was tired, so bone-deep tired from months of rejection and disappointment that I wasn't thinking clearly. And then Patricia asked the question that would change everything between us forever. "So, Rose," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to dread, "how did the job interview go today?" The children were eating their spaghetti, Grace carefully twirling hers around her fork the way I'd taught her, Oliver already finished and asking for seconds. Daniel was scrolling through something on his phone, only half listening to the conversation. It should have been just another family dinner, the kind of ordinary moment that makes up most of our lives. But I could see something dangerous flickering in Patricia's eyes, a kind of cold satisfaction that made my stomach clench. It didn't work out, I said quietly, hoping to leave it at that. They decided to restructure the position. You know that feeling when you can sense someone gathering ammunition, preparing to strike at exactly the moment when it will hurt most? Patricia set down her fork deliberately, and I watched her take a breath like a boxer preparing to throw a punch. Let me guess, she said, her voice getting louder, more theatrical. Another company that went in a different direction, right? Another place that mysteriously found a reason not to hire you. Grace looked up from her plate, sensing the change in tone. Oliver stopped eating altogether. Patricia, Daniel said softly, finally putting down his phone, maybe we should— No, Daniel, she interrupted, turning to face me fully. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about this situation. He made it clear she was talking about me, about my entire existence in their home, their lives. My heart was already racing, but I tried to keep my voice calm. I'm doing my best, I said. The job market is tough for people my age, but I'm not giving up. That's when she laughed. Not a warm laugh, not even an amused laugh, but something cold and cruel that made both children freeze completely. Not giving up, she repeated. Rose, you're 63 years old. You haven't worked in 6 months. You have no current skills, no relevant experience with modern technology, and frankly, no prospects. The words hit me like physical blows, but she wasn't finished. She was just getting started, and I realized with growing horror that this wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This was planned, calculated, designed to devastate me as completely as possible. Do you want to know what I really think? Patricia continued, her voice rising. Daniel was saying her name now, trying to stop her, but she bulldozed right through his protests. I think you're using your age as an excuse. I think you've gotten comfortable being supported by us, and you don't really want to find work. Why should you? When you can live here rent-free, eat our food, use our utilities, and contribute absolutely nothing. Grace started to cry quietly, and Oliver pushed his chair back from the table like he wanted to run. These children were witnessing their grandmother being torn apart, and that knowledge made the humiliation 10 times worse. That's not true, I managed to say, but my voice came out weak and shaky. I want to work. I need to work. Need to work? Patricia's laugh was becoming more unhinged. You had 15 years to prepare for retirement, Rose. 15 years to build savings, to plan ahead. Instead, you and your husband lived like money grew on trees, never thinking about the future. Now he's gone, and guess who gets stuck cleaning up the mess? Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Patricia, that's enough. That's way beyond enough. But she turned on him too. All the resentment she'd been building up for months, exploding like a dam bursting. Don't you enough me, Daniel? I've been patient for months while your mother has treated our home like a retirement resort. I've bitten my tongue while she mopes around here, making everyone feel guilty, acting like the world owes her something. You know that feeling when you're in an accident and time seems to slow down, when you can see exactly how everything is going to unfold, but you're powerless to stop it? That's what this moment felt like. I could see where this was heading, could see the words forming on Patricia's lips, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but sit there and wait for the final blow. I'm tired of pretending this is temporary, she said, looking directly at me now. I'm tired of pretending that someone your age is suddenly going to become employable. Face reality, Rose. No job again? You'll always be a loser. You're 63 years old. You have no skills that anyone wants, and you're never going to change. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Grace was crying openly now, and Oliver had gotten up from the table and was standing by the kitchen doorway. His young face a mixture of confusion and distress that broke my heart. These children were seeing their grandmother called a loser by their own mother, were learning that families could be cruel, that love could be conditional. Daniel was furious now, his face red with anger. "How dare you?" he said to Patricia. "How dare you talk to my mother like that? She just lost her husband. She's struggling to find work in a market that discriminates against older people. And instead of showing some compassion, you decide to—" Compassion? Patricia whirled on him. "I've been compassionate for 8 months, Daniel. 8 months of having no privacy in our own home, of walking on eggshells around someone who acts like she's doing us a favor by existing. 8 months of watching our grocery bills double and our space disappear while she contributes nothing but depression and excuses. I wanted to defend myself, wanted to point out all the ways I'd tried to help, all the small contributions I'd made. But the words wouldn't come. I felt like I'd been hollowed out, like Patricia's cruelty had scooped out everything inside me and left only shame and humiliation. "She's family," Daniel said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's my mother, and she's going through the hardest time of her life. Where is your humanity?" "My humanity is thinking about our children's future," Patricia shot back. "My humanity is wondering how long we're supposed to support someone who has given up on supporting herself. Look at her, Daniel. Really look at her. When was the last time she even tried to do something productive? When was the last time she brought anything positive to this family?" As they argued about me like I wasn't even there, I felt something inside me break completely. Not just bend or crack, but shatter into so many pieces that I wasn't sure it could ever be put back together. I thought about my husband, about how he used to tell me I was strong, capable, valuable. I thought about the woman I used to be, confident in my work, proud of my contributions to our community, secure in my place in the world. You know that feeling when you realize that the person you thought you were no longer exists? When you understand that everything you believed about your worth, your value, your right to take up space in the world has been stripped away? I felt invisible and burdensome at the same time, a ghost that cast too heavy a shadow. Grace had gotten down from her chair and was tugging on my arm. "Grandma," she whispered, "don't be sad. I love you." Her small hand in mine was warm and real, a tiny anchor in the storm of humiliation swirling around me. I looked at this precious child, saw the confusion and distress in her eyes, and realized that staying in this house wasn't just destroying me, it was hurting her too. It was teaching her that love came with conditions, that family members could be disposable when they became inconvenient. What kind of lesson was that for an 8-year-old? "I know, sweetheart," I whispered back, squeezing her hand gently. "Grandma knows." Patricia was still ranting, listing all my failures, all the ways I'd disappointed her expectations. Daniel was still defending me, but I could hear the weariness in his voice, the strain of being caught between his wife and his mother. This fight was tearing his family apart, and I was the cause. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Not the decision everyone expected me to make, not to slink away in defeat or to apologize for existing. No, I decided something else entirely. I decided that Patricia was wrong about me, that I wasn't a loser, that I wasn't done fighting for my place in this world. But first, I had to get through the rest of this horrible dinner, had to find a way to stand up from this table with whatever dignity I had left and figure out how to prove that a 63-year-old woman who had been knocked down could still get back up. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling while the house settled into uncomfortable silence around me. You know that feeling when your whole world has been turned upside down and you're not sure which way is up anymore? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Patricia's words echoing, "You'll always be a loser." The cruelty of it, the calculated way she'd chosen the exact moment when it would hurt most, made me feel sick. But somewhere in the darkness, something else was stirring. Maybe it was the memory of Grace's small hand in mine, or the way Oliver had looked so distressed by his mother's cruelty. Maybe it was thinking about my husband and how disappointed he'd be if I gave up now. Or maybe it was just pure stubbornness, the same quality that had gotten me through childbirth, through my husband's illness, through 15 years of dealing with difficult clients who thought they could push me around because I was just the bookkeeper. I got up and turned on the small lamp by my bed, then pulled out the notebook where I'd been tracking my job search. Page after page of rejections, of companies that had seemed promising until they met me in person, of opportunities that vanished the moment someone realized my age. Looking at it all laid out like that, I could understand why Patricia thought I was a lost cause. But as I flipped through those pages, I started to see patterns I'd missed before. The rejections weren't always about my age, though that was certainly a factor. Sometimes it was about skills I didn't have, technology I wasn't familiar with, ways of doing business that had changed while I was comfortable in my old position. The world had moved forward, and I'd been standing still. You know that feeling when you realize you've been approaching a problem all wrong, when a new perspective suddenly makes everything clear. I'd been trying to get back to where I was before, looking for the same kind of job, in the same kind of office, doing the same kind of work. But maybe that wasn't the answer. Maybe I needed to move forward too. I spent the rest of that sleepless night on my laptop, really looking at the job market for the first time. Not just scanning through listings and hoping something would fit, but researching what skills were actually in demand, what kinds of work could be done remotely, what opportunities existed for someone with my experience if I was willing to adapt. The next morning, Patricia avoided me completely. She got the kids ready for school and left for her part-time job at the dental office without saying a word. Daniel tried to apologize for his wife's behavior, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the toll that mediating between us was taking on him. "Mom," he said as he gathered his work things, "Patricia was way out of line last night. She's been stressed about money, and I think she took it out on you unfairly." I appreciated that he was trying to defend me, but I could also hear what he wasn't saying. He thought his wife was wrong about how she'd said it, but maybe not about what she'd said. Maybe he was wondering, too, if I'd given up, if I was becoming the burden Patricia accused me of being. "I'm going to figure this out," I told him. "I'm going to find a way to support myself." He hugged me before he left, and I could feel his relief, not relief that I was leaving, but relief that I was fighting back, that I wasn't going to let Patricia's cruelty define me. After everyone was gone, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started researching in earnest. I learned about online freelancing platforms, about remote bookkeeping opportunities, about small businesses that needed help but couldn't afford a full-time employee. I discovered that my skills weren't as outdated as I'd thought. They just needed to be applied in new ways. The technology part was intimidating. The software I'd used at Henderson and Associates was primitive compared to what most businesses were using now. But I found online courses, YouTube tutorials, free training programs, specifically designed for older workers who needed to update their skills. It was overwhelming at first, but also exciting in a way I hadn't felt in months. You know that feeling when you start learning something new and your brain feels like it's waking up after a long sleep. That's what happened to me over the next few weeks. Every day, I spent hours learning new software, understanding how modern bookkeeping worked, figuring out how to market myself to potential clients. Patricia's attitude toward me shifted during this time, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of being encouraging, she seemed almost annoyed that I was trying so hard. She'd make comments about playing on the computer all day and wasting time on pipe dreams. It was as if she'd decided I was a failure and didn't want to be proven wrong. The first breakthrough came 3 weeks after that terrible dinner. I found a posting on a freelancing website from a small restaurant owner who needed help organizing her books for tax season. She was offering a modest fee for what seemed like a manageable project. My hands were shaking as I submitted my proposal, explaining my experience and promising to learn whatever software she preferred to use. She responded the same day. Not only was she interested, but she was specifically looking for someone mature and experienced who would take the work seriously. I've tried hiring younger freelancers, she wrote, but they often disappear in the middle of projects or do careless work. I'm hoping someone with your background will be more reliable. My first client. After months of rejection, someone actually wanted to hire me. I spent that evening learning the restaurant's accounting software, staying up until midnight to make sure I understood every feature. When I presented my first week's work, the owner was thrilled. "This is exactly what I needed," she said. "Would you be interested in ongoing work?" You know that feeling when something you thought was impossible suddenly becomes real? I had my first regular client, earning my own money again, contributing something valuable to the world. It wasn't much, just a few hours a week, but it was a start. Word spread in that mysterious way it does in small business communities. The restaurant owner recommended me to her friend who ran a small consulting firm. That friend mentioned me to someone who needed help with nonprofit bookkeeping. Within 2 months, I had 5 regular clients and was earning almost as much as I'd made at my old job. More importantly, I was learning and growing in ways I hadn't in years. Each client had different needs, different software, different challenges. Instead of doing the same routine work day after day, I was constantly adapting, problem solving, figuring out new ways to help these businesses succeed. Patricia's reaction to my success was complicated. On one hand, she couldn't deny that I was now contributing financially to the household, paying for my own expenses and even helping with groceries. On the other hand, she seemed almost resentful that her prediction about my being a permanent loser hadn't come true. Daniel was genuinely proud. He'd bragged to his friends about his mom becoming an entrepreneur at 63, and I could see the relief in his face as the tension in the house began to ease. The kids were happier too, picking up on the more positive energy and spending more time with me as my confidence returned. But success brought its own challenges. As my client base grew, I needed dedicated workspace, reliable internet, professional phone service, things that were difficult to manage in someone else's home. I also realized that I needed some distance from Patricia's negativity. Even when she wasn't being openly hostile, her skeptical comments about my work were undermining my confidence. You know that feeling when you realize you've outgrown a situation that once seemed permanent? I started looking at apartments, small places I could afford with my new income, not because I was angry or trying to punish anyone, but because I needed space to become who I was meant to be at this stage of my life. The apartment I found was tiny but perfect. A one-bedroom in a complex that catered to seniors, with a small office nook where I could work undisturbed. It had a little balcony overlooking a garden, and for the first time in almost a year, I could imagine myself being happy somewhere. 6 months after that horrible dinner, I told Daniel and Patricia that I'd be moving out at the end of the month. Patricia's reaction was telling. Instead of seeming relieved, she looked almost panicked. I think she'd gotten used to having me around as a scapegoat for her frustrations, and the idea of losing that outlet was unsettling. You don't have to leave, Daniel said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Things are better now. We've worked through the rough patch. I need my own space, I explained. I'm building a business now, and I need room to grow. Plus, you and Patricia deserve your privacy back, and the kids need to see their parents as the heads of their own household. The night before I moved out, Patricia knocked on my door. It was the first time she'd initiated a conversation with me in months, and I was curious about what she wanted to say. I want to apologize, she began, though her tone suggested the words were difficult for her. I said some cruel things that night at dinner, things I didn't really mean. I waited for her to continue, but she seemed to think that was enough. No acknowledgement of the months of subtle hostility, no recognition of how her treatment had affected the children, no understanding of the damage her words had done to someone who was already vulnerable. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, but I think we both know this arrangement wasn't working for anyone. I'm not angry, Patricia. I'm grateful. Your words that night forced me to take a hard look at my life and make changes I should have made months earlier. You know that feeling when you realize that sometimes the worst thing someone can do to you turns out to be exactly what you needed. Patricia's cruelty had been the wake-up call I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and start fighting for my future. Moving into my own apartment felt like stepping into a new life. For the first time since my husband's death, I had space that was entirely mine. Silence when I wanted it. The freedom to work at 3 in the morning if inspiration struck, or to take a break in the middle of the day if I felt like it. My business continued to grow. I developed specialties in nonprofit accounting and restaurant bookkeeping, areas where my experience and attention to detail were particularly valued. I took courses in tax preparation and business consulting, expanding my services and my expertise. The scared, desperate woman who had sat at that dinner table 6 months earlier felt like someone I used to know. The relationship with my family evolved too. Daniel and I grew closer as the stress of the living situation disappeared. He'd call to check on me, visit on weekends, bring the kids over to see my new place. Without the daily friction of sharing a household, we could just enjoy being mother and son again. Grace and Oliver loved having their own spaces in both places, their regular rooms at home and special drawers full of activities at Grandma's apartment. They seemed more relaxed around me too, no longer walking on eggshells or worrying about adult tensions they couldn't understand. Even Patricia's attitude began to shift, though it took time. I think seeing me succeed, watching me build something meaningful from nothing, forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about her own assumptions and prejudices. She started asking about my work with what seemed like genuine interest, though she never directly acknowledged how wrong she'd been about my potential. You know that feeling when you realize you're stronger than you ever imagined? Every challenge I faced in building my business, difficult clients, technology problems, busy seasons that stretched me thin, only reinforced my confidence in my ability to adapt and overcome. A year after I moved out, something beautiful happened. Grace, now 9, was doing a school project about people she admired. She chose me, and when I attended her presentation, I heard her tell her classmates about her grandmother, who started her own business when she was old and proved that age is just a number. Sitting in that elementary school classroom, listening to my granddaughter describe me as someone strong and inspiring, I felt a completeness I hadn't experienced since losing my husband. I'd found my way back to being someone I could be proud of, someone who contributed value to the world, someone worthy of admiration from the people who mattered most. The business continued to flourish. By my second year of freelancing, I was earning more than I'd ever made as an employee, with clients who valued my expertise and experience. I hired a part-time assistant, a woman in her 50s who'd been laid off and was struggling to find work. Together, we built something meaningful, proving that age and experience could be assets rather than liabilities in the right environment. Patricia and I eventually reached a kind of peace. Not the warm relationship I might have hoped for, but a respectful acknowledgement of each other's place in the family. She never apologized for her cruelty in any meaningful way, but she did stop making disparaging comments about older workers and even referred a friend's mother to my services. You know that feeling when you realize that forgiveness isn't about the other person deserving it, but about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment? I found that holding on to anger about Patricia's treatment was only hurting me. Her words that night had been cruel and unnecessary, but they'd also been the catalyst for positive changes I might never have made otherwise. 3 years later, I'm thriving in ways I never expected. My business has grown to the point where I'm considering hiring additional staff. I've developed expertise in areas I never would have explored in my old job. I'm learning new technologies, taking on challenging projects, building relationships with business owners who see me as an essential part of their success. Most importantly, I've discovered that starting over at 63 isn't a sign of failure. It's proof of resilience. Every client who trusts me with their financial records, every problem I solve, every skill I master is evidence that Patricia was wrong. I'm not a loser. I'm a survivor, a fighter, a woman who refused to let other people's limited vision define what was possible for her life. The children see this too. Grace talks about wanting to start her own business someday, inspired by watching her grandmother build something from nothing. Oliver, now 13 and dealing with his own challenges in school, often calls me when he's struggling with a problem, knowing I'll understand what it feels like to face something that seems impossible and find a way through it. Daniel tells me regularly how proud he is of what I've accomplished. But more than that, he talks about the woman I've become, more confident, more independent, more authentically myself than I was even before his father died. Loss and humiliation forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I had. You know that feeling when you realize that the worst day of your life led to some of the best days you've ever had? That terrible dinner, Patricia's cruel words, the humiliation I felt in front of my grandchildren. It was all necessary to get me to where I am now. If you're watching this and you're facing your own version of that dinner table moment, if someone has told you that you're too old, too late, too set in your ways to change your circumstances, I want you to know something. They're wrong. Age brings wisdom, experience, perspective that younger people don't have. The challenges you've survived, the skills you've developed, the work ethic you've cultivated over decades. These are assets, not liabilities. The world needs what you have to offer, even if it takes some creativity to figure out how to package and present it. You know that feeling when you're told you don't matter anymore, that your best years are behind you? I've been there. I've felt that crushing weight of other people's dismissal, that sense that maybe they're right, maybe I really am past my prime. But here's what I learned. Their limitations are not your reality. The job market may be challenging for older workers, but it's not impossible. The technology may seem overwhelming, but it's learnable. The energy you think you've lost can be rediscovered when you find work that truly engages you. Starting over isn't easy at any age, but it's possible at every age. For those of you dealing with family members who've lost faith in your potential, remember that their doubts say more about their own fears and limitations than they do about your capabilities. Sometimes the people closest to us have the hardest time seeing us change and grow because it challenges their own assumptions about what's possible in their lives. And for those of you who have been where Patricia was that night, who have looked at an older family member or friend struggling with change and felt impatient or dismissive, I hope my story helps you understand that support and encouragement can make all the difference between someone giving up and someone discovering new possibilities. The woman who sat at that dinner table 3 years ago, broken and humiliated, couldn't have imagined the life I'm living now. She thought her story was ending, but it was actually just beginning a new chapter. Your story isn't over either. No matter what anyone else thinks, no matter how many doors have closed, no matter how impossible things seem right now, you have more chapters to write. Sometimes the cruelest words become the greatest motivators. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted helps you discover what you actually need. Sometimes the people who count you out are doing you the biggest favor of your life. You know that feeling when you finally prove to yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances? That's waiting for you too. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger, more creative, more determined to write your own story, regardless of what other people think is possible. Your age is not your limitation. Your past is not your ceiling. Your critics are not your truth. You have value, you have potential, and you have time to discover what you're truly capable of achieving. The dinner table moment was just the beginning. The real story starts with what you choose to do next.